Dear colleagues, we are continuing our conference, and now it's a sign that it's time to take your seats, finish your drink or take it with you, and we need to prepare for discussion because we are going to have a dialogue with all of you, and we are going to discuss the book of Preet Barara, Doing Justice. So I'm inviting our panelist, Vasylyna Yavorska, who is going to moderate this discussion, Ihor Semak, Volodymyr Sushchenko, Yaryna Sydiy, and Ihor Polshikov. I'm giving the floor to you, and welcome. Good evening, dear colleagues. I will probably come closer to you to see part of the room. I want to make an introduction about what we are going to discuss. I can see these wonderful books on your tables. We are not going to read together, but we will just reveal a little bit about why this book is interesting for us and for you. My name is Vasylyna Yavorska, and I'm a member of JustGroup, Just for Justice, and we work with transformation of the institutions. And when we talk about transformation, we mean changes on this, changes in people, changes in systems, and the most important for us is human capital in the system of criminal justice. And this book was translated by our initiative for that particular reason. If you open this book, here on the left, there is a quote which we selected as introduction to this book, because it is about people, and that any transformations are made by people. People bring their sense in what they are doing based on how we see our role in certain position, and it influences the way how we work and how we follow the rules or exercise the rights. And when our small group, and we are reading this book of Preet Barara in English, we came to conclusion that we have a lot of literature which is very practical. We have codes and commentary, but we have very few books which brings lawyers or people who work with law into this discussion about ethics, about law. And Preet Barara was a federal prosecutor in the United States, and he worked with crimes with grand corruption, terrorism. And when he left his position, he wrote this book, Reflection, about the role of a prosecutor. For us, this book is important because it was published by professional community. From the point of view of resources, we use only resources of those people who work with laws, and they wanted to do more. They didn't want just to be a good investigator, prosecutor, or judge. It's important for us to create products which would make our jobs better. So it's published with the funds of crowdfunding campaign, and it was published at the beginning of this year, even though it was planned to publish it in 2022. But of course, the events in the country delayed the date. Another reason why this book is important, because a very special person edited this book. Ihor is with us here, and this is the first speaker who is going to start our discussion, because he did truly a lot for this book to happen in Ukrainian, and he is the prosecutor of specialized anti-corruption prosecution, and now he serves in the Armed Forces of Ukraine, and he was the chief editor of a Ukrainian edition of this book. And this is a really heartwarming story for us, because the first translation we received in March or April 2022, and it was a big challenge. For us, we all remember April or March of 2022, we didn't really think about books, or we didn't read much then. And we had the thought, either we can put it off or we can publish it. And so Ihor was serving in the army, and he was in parallel editing the book. Also here there are my colleagues who are members of this community. They didn't just read this book, they lived this book. We discuss it a lot inside of our community, and they will share those stories which were the most important to them. We prepared for you some extracts from this book. We also prepared for you some really bright and good quotes, but it is all about dialogue, so we encourage you to comment. I heard that it's possible to get a microphone, and what you think, whether you believe it's something relevant or not, what you experience, what you think about the stories. And I really want to be interactive with you. And to start our dialogue, I think that I will give the floor to Ihor first. So what is this book to you about? And we have a lot of people working with law here in this room, so why they should read this book, what they can find there? Good evening. Is my sound okay? Yes, it is okay. Great. Good evening once again. The book, as you can understand from the title, that it's about justice. And the justice, my first boss was a lawyer. And then I was assistant of an MP, then I was detective of NABU. 4 years before the invasion, I was a prosecutor. So I have no illusion about our justice system and the justice and fairness that we have or don't have in the system. But I went through, I left this stage, whether it's fair or just, but I came to the conclusion that they are good for society and we serve our society. And if we don't have this aspiration to justice, it's bad. It's bad for society, and society is our client. It's good, but it's very difficult to share the idea of justice. You cannot teach it at university the way you study law. Not always universities are able to make it your value, and the best way how to give these people this aspiration towards justice. That's role models, whether of your bosses or your peers. We don't have many examples of people like that. But in this book, you can find experience of basically our brothers and sisters in arms. So these federal prosecutors of New York, how they work on really complicated cases. These are not naive people who put some local deputy once a year for corruption. They investigated, and you can find these stories in the book, Mafia of New York, and schemes for billions of dollars of huge corporations. They detained millionaires who had very powerful connections among politicians. But at the same time, they work with day-to-day, so-called day-to-day crime. So these are not naive people, and the book is so good. And I believe that we lack this experience of communicating. Basically, like if you read this book, you will have a feeling that you had an honest conversation with a glass of beer at a pub with your American colleague. This person is this person is experienced, smart, but who experiences the same things that you have at work, and I found that we are not that different, even though our legal systems are pretty different. The way how their work is organized and some basic principles of justice, they are very similar with ours. And for that reason, it's so interesting to read, because you can easily transfer this into Ukrainian context. The book is so good that, as Vasylyna said, that even the war didn't stop us from publishing. I was lucky to get this job. It was a good distraction when I was at the defense lines near Kharkiv, Kupiansk, and Balaklia. I could run from my trenches to Starlink to upload some parts of translation, to work in my tent somewhere in the forest, and to edit it on my phone, and it was really good distraction, and it helped me, because that's what we are fighting for. Fighting on the military front and all the work that we do at the rear, because it's all about future, the future of our country. But the future, a positive future, not about fight, destruction, murder, but the future about creating something new and better. And this book was worth it. It's not just giving you some ideals or philosophy of an American prosecutor. It helps you work not only in a better way or more correct way, but definitely work better. And my second insight was that it's not really about external barriers like bad bosses, problems with laws, corruption, massive workload, wrong judges. The book mentions all of this as well, but at the same time, it's about our internal barriers on the way towards just decisions, working with our prejudice, stereotypes, fighting the slow system, and this inactivity that system infects all the people who work in it. And that's what the book is about. And as it helps us work better, I decided to work with it, edit it, and I encourage all of you to read it. You will definitely enjoy the book. It's written in a simple style. The stories are practical and necessary for our prosecution. Thank you very much, Ihor. Ihor will stay with us, and if you have any comments or reflections, you can always join our discussion. Now let's go back to what I mentioned. We have 3 stories from this book that these panelists will share. So I would like to give the floor to Yaryna Sydiy. Share your story. Thank you very much, Vasylyna. Greetings, everyone. To begin with, maybe it sounds scary that this book was written by a prosecutor and you will think it's only about prosecution. But when you open the content and you look at the first pages, you will see that it's about all stages of criminal justice. It's about investigation, prosecution, court, and punishment. And at any stage, there is a lot of reflection about fair punishment. Now on your tables, you have some printed materials. And when you open the first case, it is called the problem of prejudice. You can look through the story, and while you are reading, I will share my reflections. Imagine Europe, March the 11th, 2004. This day is called the equivalent of September the 11th of yes, so that was the bloodiest road to work. Terrorists blow up 4 trains in the center of Madrid. 10 bombs explode, which were in backpacks with explosives and nails. So the train splits in half. People's bodies are torn into pieces. 2,000 people are injured and hundreds are dead. And we know what mobilizes the justice system in the best way. That's terrorism. Terrorists most probably represent Islam. They worked in the center to bring the most dire consequences for Europe. So law enforcement, they start to work. They have National Police of Spain. They start to look for witnesses, evidence, hundreds of agents. They cover hundreds of kilometers around Madrid, and they find in the abandoned bus a blue plastic bag with remains of explosives. They couldn't believe their luck. They find 2 fingerprints on this bag. But there is a problem, because in the Spanish database, these fingerprints are not matched with anyone. They send these fingerprints to the most elite system of justice, FBR, and they start to process everything that Spanish police found, and they go through 44 million fingerprints. And the search gives 20 matches. then it all comes down to one person. Investigator checks, and they believe that it's a complete match. Then another professional expert confirms, and after that, there is the third confirmation from the head of the unit. But when they find out who the person is, because it's white man, 37, lawyer, who has a wife and children, he never visited the United States. But why his fingerprints are there? Because he was a Lieutenant American Army, and then he was retired. Then other facts are found. It turns out that he married a Muslim immigrant from Egypt. He became Muslim himself. He visited a mosque in Beaverton, in Oregon. And there were some suspicions about this mosque. He was a lawyer or a terrorist of so-called Portland 7. And all these 7 people, they were providing funding for Al-Qaeda and Taliban. His fingerprints matched with the fingerprints found by the National Police of Spain. It seems that it's enough to knock out this person. What do you think? Do you believe that that's enough? Not enough. In this case, we can go to part 2. We can look at page number 2, and we see that agents started to start surveillance Mainfield and his family. His house was secretly searched. They knew everything about his work, his vacations, hobbies, and because fingerprints, that was the only evidence.
And there was no evidence that he had left the country. His foreign passport was no longer valid a year before. Telephone recording or said that he was calling from the phone director of Islamic charity organization, but there are no other evidence in the negotiation. The FBI trusts their science because you need to corroborate the prints to dismiss the bias. And so the investigation didn't find any substantial evidence, and it's ridiculous because during the search there was a document in Spanish that would corroborate his participation, but it turned out a homework of his daughter. The search in the home computer found that he was searched in Spain, local residential housing, schedule of trains, but it turns out the homework of his daughter. The phone number of Islamic phone was recorded, but turns out that he was looking for opportunities for international cooperation for his son. Then the police had the problem regarding the corroboration of this picture being a clue. So police didn't agree to confirm the validity of this prince. It turns out it's Algerian prince who was a suspect in terrorist act because the middle finger matched Daoud and he was called Umam. So Mayfield was relieved of all the charges, and FBI paid $2 million compensation, begging for excuse from Mr. Mayfield and his family for the problems caused. What do you think led to what we see in the end result? So the charges were brought, then still it turns out not this person committed a crime, but still there were some negative consequences for the falsely accused, for their life. And do you have any ideas what led to that? Bias, prejudice, professional assessment of the scene. I think the error was when we tried to find evidence. Something with the prince, something was missing. And they were winging it. And they started, stretching the evidence too much. Right, I agree. Anyone, any considerations? All right, let me say what I think happened. Okay. Maybe the fact that they doubted the first assessment that was conducted, and then they went along to not try and question the first set of evidence. Any other versions? We think that it's the story where they want to crack the case as fast as possible. A lot of people suffered, and they were stretching their theory. They didn't basically conduct a thorough investigation and elaboration on the body of evidence. I like your arguments. They basically deliver the point of Preet Barara, who concluded the following. As you understand, right after this event, the FBI was massively criticized. New York Times said that they grounded the case in unsubstantial evidence, and as New York Times wrote, the analysts can be wrong sometimes. Mayfield himself said that the atmospheres of fear, the fight with terrorism, went too extreme, and as a result, the innocent people suffer. Federal prosecutor said that we're prosecutors, we're not forensics. We trust the evidence of FBI if they corroborate the fingerprints of a certain person. FBI also had an internal investigation reaching the conclusion that the reason was the initial overconfidence and negligence. So there at the end, and reaching the point where there was no more return to the initial set of evidence. So the false decision about the bits, about the fingerprints, could have been avoided if they were more thorough in identifying the images of the prints. And you can see it was difficult to change the decision, but it was easy to find corroboration. And so it's not easy to be unbiased if somebody higher up already reached a conclusion. And it's hard to change your own opinion. Far more difficult to change out somebody other's opinion if it's hierarchically higher than you. And a person who's believed an authority and a professional drives a conclusion, then the subsequent experts may find it hard to disagree with it. And so to find a decision, for many years, and back in 2012, one of the experts who ran this examination, he would say the following in the interview: never in the history there were two fingerprints with 15 similar detail that would belong to the same people. So based on our standards, I was right, but I was not right. I made a mistake, as each of the experts who analyzed these prints, and the person was conscientious enough to admit to their mistake. To be conscientious enough to do that is already super important. We also see that the worst mistake was usually would make from the best intention. So bad stuff is done by smart, competent people with no ill will, and that is the most scary thing about responsibility. Ideal laws might have limits, and the most reliable approaches can be limited because people are responsible for interpretation of results can be erroneous. So small mistakes can make a mistake in calculating the trajectory of a missile, and so the innocent will suffer, and the guilty will not be punished. So legal losses at guilt, legal arrests they can be due, or false accusation can also be a result. In total, the law is not perfect. We understand that the system is not perfect, and as we can see from this case, as Brandon and Mayfield's case, people are not perfect either. The legislation is justice is not guaranteed. But if you are ready to change your opinion, if you're at least open enough to change your opinion, if you were admit you were wrong, that's already means a lot. So in the end, I'd like to quote this. One of the judges, he said, I would like to see on top of every church or legislation house or court, for the love of God, reserve the room for being wrong in your assessment, in your initial assessment. And he would nail that phrase on every prosecution office. Never think that you cannot be wrong, or never think that you're always right. So I pass the floor to Igor. So my story of Preet Barara, it's an interesting story, and the printout of the story, you have it on your hand. So curiosity is more of a childish trait, who are always open and genuinely interested, and that is their growth mechanism that allows them to learn something new. So he talks about these features as the necessary features for any professional legal person or prosecutor who deals in criminal proceedings. And Preet, an interesting story that he tells about, and I think it's not surprising. So he's talking about his colleague, Joshua Levin, also a prosecutor who was part of the department investigating fraud in securities. I understand that it's a difficult thing in criminal justice. You need experience for that, specific knowledge and skills. And this particular unit had an interesting case that dealt with brokerage of securities. And the prosecution office was preparing the indictment. And they were lucky. There was a potential witness that an experienced assistant to the federal prosecutor had to do. So they called in the witness, and the testimony was appointed. But then the prosecutor had something unexpected happened. So they caught some SKP, and he had to talk to him. So you see, it's like you were preparing to do something, and then something urgent, and due to calls, and you are elsewhere. And so the witness was already summoned, and they had to continue. And they decided that this is Joshua's friend, and that's him who will continue, who should conduct the interview. He's a smart guy, but he doesn't understand the specifics. And in order to somehow deal with the situation, he had this genius idea. He asked the witness, he says, still you will have to talk in the court, although it's about the jury, but still is applicable in our situation. The court or the jury doesn't understand anything, so please, when you will talk about these transactions, you tell me as if I'm your nephew, a young nephew. So describe the situation in layman's terms, and that's how he evaded the situation, because he couldn't ask any normal question or clarifying question. And so that simple approach allowed him to achieve a certain result. Because furthermore, this witness also provided a clear and understandable testimony for the jury and other participants. And so John has also used this experience in his further work as a prosecutor, because he used this phrase, "Tell me everything as if I'm your 9-year-old nephew." So Peter drives the conclusion that it was a smart way to elicit information and also a way to soften up your vis-a-vis and elicit the necessary info. So this chapter is dedicated to curiosity, and there are interesting ideas there. I hope you will make use of them, because the first thing he's talking about is that for any smart person, it's hard to seem dumb, because if you have background, education, status, and then don't know, or don't know something, it's awkward. But he says that it happens to everyone, and you just have to learn to be calm in it. Don't be ashamed at asking questions or being curious about something, and learn something new through that and grow. He also reflects a lot on the managers that also may not know something, so they should be open to new information, new approaches, and understanding. So, some quotes from this book when we decided to share. It says that in this criminal law allows you to avoid mistakes, and it's better to ask additional question or dumb question than to have evidence dismissed. So you have to inquiry your witnesses. So if you don't clear some question, then you may run into a surprise or two in the courtroom, and that's what he's talking about. So he says to doubt is normal. Nobody can know everything or understand everything. So here, being able to doubt yourself, that you know everything, it can be your friend. If you're overconfident or narcissistic, that's your enemy. And probably many of you know this, and the answer to this no, and it turns out our foreign friends also have that. Preet says that he's sorry when he's asked why you do this the way you do it, and the answer is, we've always done that way. It's just the system is established for a long time. We're just in there. We may not understand something. We want to know why we do that. But many of us are reluctant. They don't know. They don't want to know why. They just say, we've always done like that, and that's it. So Preet's resume is that such answer blocks the way of innovation, efficacy, and potentially also justice, because you should always be inquisitive. You should always be curious about yourself and the society, because that is the way to achieve justice in our system of criminal justice. We pass the floor to our third speaker, but you see a lot of parallels here. You also do a lot in developing people in criminal justice system, and when we were reading this chapter, we've always done that. It seemed like when you come in the room full of students or listeners and you suggest something new, you could expect some reluctance. It's normal in any system or law enforcement system. It's important to know how to deal with it. So what's your attitude towards anything and new information? Do you have a tradition to ask yourself questions or people around you? And the third story, Volodymyr. Hello, everyone. it's it's uh, it's so unusual to see prosecutors and police officers on round tables during the trainings, because usually we meet like we see each other's heads and we face the same way. It's so nice to have you all like this in the format, and I'm happy that you're interested in literature, and this literature in particular. It's an interesting book. I'm not going to repeat what my colleagues said. I've read it several times over. I read it back when it was a manuscript, and it helped me to write or copy, rather, an electronic version of this manuscript. 6 pages of quotations from this book. That's my long wish to read books and write, copying stuff from it. And the story that I'm telling you, why I took it, it was about protecting the rights of a victim of a crime. Because usually we're used to talk about protecting the rights of a suspect or a perpetrator, because that's what you need to do, and maybe the state does something wrong, but you have to protect them. But how do you protect the victims? We always pay not enough attention. Not always it's victim-centered. Not always the prosecution, the police, and the courts are victim-centered. And it can play in different ways. What this author describes is the same story. And he was telling it in a chapter which says, "A day in the courtroom." And the whole chapter is dedicated to the victim of a crime. And it was a woman of 30 years old, and she was single, and she was a sex worker. And she was attacked at home in her own apartment, attacked by 2 men. One of them was armed, and they beat her up pretty badly. She was barely alive in the hospital for 6 days, rehabilitating at home afterwards. She was raped, and she was raped as she was unconscious after she was beat up, and she was sick. She had a chronic illness, epilepsy. And in that kind of situation, in that kind of state, one of the attackers raped her, and she was also robbed of her money. The main objective of the criminals was to rob her, because they knew she was a sex worker, so they stole $11,000, and that was the story. And first and foremost, the district prosecutor was influenced by the fact that this woman is leading an indecent life. So she may have provoked, victim's behavior, and the district prosecutor dismissed the notion to investigate this crime. But the information was already public for everyone in the system of law enforcement and legal system. And one of the New York detectives was interested in that information. So he did care. And he decided to try and crack this crime, to investigate. So he went to one of the federal prosecutors. The whole system was there, Southern Precinct, New York. And this prosecutor had a young assistant who was also interested in this case. And so they started investigating it. I'm not going to dwell on it. There are interesting methods and tools. And I can only tell you one of the most important tools here was telephone analysis of the suspect, all the records, and everything that's happening when tapping the phone, when you do investigation in most cases. So in the long run, the situation ran in such a way that the prosecutor was doubting. So the prosecution opened all the evidence to the defense. The defense agreed with what has been that the guilt was confirmed, and so the defense and the suspect will bargain the plea deal, or will find a agreement with the investigation. Which, for the New York State, it says that the litigation happens in a short form, without actual inquiry into witnesses and the victims. But there were no witness. You know, the victim was the only witness and the only victim. And plus, there were no materials and the trace of these crimes, other than the physical damage, broken ribs, damaged face.
But there was no DNA, no fingerprints, nothing like that. Anyway, they managed to collect sufficient evidence. This evidence was revealed to the defense, and then the prosecutor was not sure whether it was good to go to court to have the full trial, but the victim wanted to have a trial. She wanted to be heard. She wanted to speak up. Because if they settle, who would know about these events? A victim, a lawyer, a judge, but she wanted the society to know. So there was a full trial, and jury believed the victim, and the suspect was guilty. And it's an example that the life of a person has to be in the spotlight and in the center of everything we do. And it has to be in the center for all of us who are trying to punish the offenders, who try to bring justice. And I think that I looked at this story. I will not go into details, but for three times in my life, I was a victim of crimes. Two of them I am embarrassed to share, but it was one of the crimes was scam. I just believed the scam, but I never went into trial. I am a lifelong victim without satisfaction. And I selected a few quotes which, in my opinion, demonstrate the essence of this activity of a prosecutor and the essence of work of the representatives of the justice system and law enforcement, but of course lawyers. From the point of view of attentive and caring attitude towards every person. I don't know whether I need to read this, but it's an interesting quote. And this is a quote of Preet Barara, because he introduced his assistant. He was federal prosecutor. He had an assistant, and so he submitted her for the award, the highest award for prosecutor, and this is the award of Barrister Association. The Association of Barristers. So this is the highest award for prosecutor for the state of New York for assistance of prosecutors. And when she received this award, I will read only the first sentence. My work is interesting, and it's interesting to investigate murders, but we do it for victims and their families, to give them at least some level of justice, to help them to heal their wounds at least a little bit. And another quote. So this is the case about, so to protect justice, it's important not only for victim, not for investigation team, but to show the possibility of justice for everyone. And the last quote, justice, or even their fair attempt to find justice, is not guaranteed by law or facts. If imperfect and cowardly people are trying to achieve it, their mindset is important as well. That what Barara is saying, he says that it's not enough just to be professional and to know everything, to have all the professional skills, but you need to have the proper mindset, this value-based approach, which allows you to use your professional skills in the best way. Oh, no, actually one more quote. Can you read without me? Can the audience read? So, trying to bring justice is important. Sometimes we forget about victims, sometimes we doubt them, sometimes we judge the victims in the way how I told you the story about a sex worker. But justice system serves them and gives them a chance to be heard during trial according to the framework. And it doesn't matter whether it happened to a 3-year-old little girl, to the sex worker Sue Ann, or a young woman who is harassed by an influential man. And the last quote, it's about everything and about all of us. The truth is simple. The justice system in any society means that we have moral code. Law and ethics, they are not always the same. Or morals, it's not always the same. But what society wants to punish is close to what they believe is unacceptable and immoral. And if society follows its own laws, so society gives the tools, society chooses what needs to be punished, and it's all about the moral of this society. And prosecutors are not cowboys or punishers. They are not computers, and their decisions, so their AI will not work instead of us. Justice, as I repeat all the time, is done by people, and they decide what to do or what not to do. And the decisions are made by people, and sometimes these people are not perfect. They have their own prejudice. And these prejudices we can see in imperfect systems and bureaucracy. But we need to remember that the decisions we made, they change fates of people. Maybe you have some ideas, opinions. It would be interesting to hear your thoughts, because I just keep talking and I don't know whether I was heard. Any comments from the audience? Are you all tired? Probably we tried to just open a few pages of this book. We wanted to motivate you to look into it faster, because we know that sometimes we put the book on to read list, but then these books are waiting for us. But we believe that you can start reading this book from any chapter. We randomly selected those stories that were close to our hearts, and we try to show that sometimes it's important to work with your prejudice and not to focus only on the first idea, and then to think why this justice system works, who should be in the center of this universe, where we play our roles every day. We will be happy to hear your comments, your reflections, and if you read the book. And it would be great if prosecutors or judges can think deeper about their role and what they can do for society and justice. Ihor, if you're still with us, maybe you have some final thoughts? Yes, about the first case. It's actually a very notable feature of this book, because it is about our psychology of us as professionals of the justice system. And this story about being inactive, it really something that is close to my heart and to the hearts of my colleagues. It's very hard to put into trash something you had been working on, because you have so many different tests, expertise, interrogations that last hours. So all the time that you could have spent with your family, but you need to work on this ability to just set aside the theory if it doesn't work. And there is pressure from society and like your bosses, and it's easy sometimes to go with the flow, but you need to be able to say no, it doesn't hold up. Maybe it will be harder for you, but if you are able to do so, it will be for justice. And I remember this quote that if we start writing something else, like you always want a template, and basically it's normal to have standard procedures. That's fine, but sometimes we need to. You need at every stage. You need to add some analysis and reevaluate whether you need just to go with the flow, or you need to add some doubt if you feel that something doesn't hold up. And you also mentioned that Preet is talking about analogies, and when we work with artillery, so we are using some special tools, and basically you need to use the stars to calibrate your artillery. So you need to look at the star and then you look at the calibrating of the tool, then you calibrate your launching system, and then you collect some knowledge. It's not that you calibrate and then you have to check. It's not that you choose, oh, maybe I should check because I'm not sure. You have to check. And that's important. And it's important because when we investigate, we change the life of a victim or a suspect. So you always need to calibrate and recalibrate and check and recheck. And that's how we need to work. And about this story about the Suen, the victim, it's very interesting how Americans and Ukrainians treat courts, because for us, court is something bad. But for her, it was everybody has their right for the day in court. And it shows the right of a person to tell their story, where the person is going to be listened to, heard without interruption. It's about the protective function of the court and the right to be heard, which is a huge part of the satisfaction for a victim, regardless what decision the court can make. Because the ability to be listened to, we recognize that this person exists, and the person has the right to be respected and to have dignity. So the book is awesome because it combines some philosophical ideas with a detailed, scrupulous description of the work of a prosecutor, and these details will be familiar to all of us. Thank you very much, Ihor. Thank you that you could join. Thank you for what you are doing now. It's very important to hear from you. Thank you, everyone. It was not really interactive, but we hope that we made you interested. Thank you for your day-to-day work. We wish you strength and inspiration, because justice depends on you, and we hope that justice has a chance in our country. Have a nice evening. Thank you very much.